Hello and greetings to you. This is Chaplain's Compass, where we are navigating the beautiful and diverse waters of spiritual health, spiritual care, and chaplaincy. My name is John Betz.
And I'm Tremaine, and I am super excited about our guest today because it's someone that not only do I like and respect, but we go back so long ago. We were at McAfee School of Theology together. We graduated class of '06, which is crazy to think about because that's almost 20 years ago. We have such good memories from that time, at least I do, that time in my life, just very transformative, built some really good relationships. Brett has done a lot of different things in ministry and has a lot of unique experiences. Most recently, Brett and I reconnected about chaplaincy, related to chaplaincy, because he has completed a residency with CPE at the VA, and he's done some hospice work at Four Seasons in Nashville, North Carolina. So because of that, we have reconnected through some chaplaincy activities and groups. And I'm really excited to talk to you, Brett, on the podcast. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Lucy and John. Nice to meet you. And I'm excited to be on the podcast. I've definitely listened to a bunch of your episodes and learned a lot. So I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on here. It's funny because a lot of times I talk with chaplains. One of the shared features that I find with a lot of people, almost all the chaplains I find, is that their journey to chaplaincy, to spiritual health, to spiritual care was always a very circuitous one where people are like, I'm going to go this direction. And then all of a sudden life throws them a curveball, or they find passion for chaplaincy. They go, whoa, what was that? So I would love to hear more about what brought you into chaplaincy and spiritual health care, and also how has your role changed to where you are today?
Yeah, and that's definitely the way my journey towards chaplaincy came, John. I moved to Western North Carolina in Asheville, and I thought there's just going to be so many wonderful jobs for moderate Baptists, and I kind of had this vision of, I don't know, working in a church and doing A, B, C, or D, and I got here, and there is really only one church that I would prefer to work at, and they were not hiring. So looking around, I found there was a local position at the CPE training at the VA here in Asheville. And thinking back to my time at McAfee, I didn't really know much about CPE. And when I took the job, realized how little I knew about it, but then quickly became, of course, enamored with CPE and the tools that it gave me that I wished I had had through years of ministry. I think specifically, the best tools being that instead of what can I give you as a minister and what answers can I give you is maybe my, shallow way of thinking of ministry in the past. But instead of that, coming to a person and saying, what tools do you already have for your own success and your own healing and your own advantages? And so it was a wonderful introduction, but definitely not what I was looking for. And so I think that's how it's also shifted me the most, and through that learning of coming to people in a different way and asking different questions, being curious about different things. And it's been wonderful.
Yeah, and I wonder, too, if the experience that you had prior to chaplaincy was already priming you for that shift, and really curious to hear more about the time that you were in the South Pole. So in between serving at a church and going through CPE training and serving as a chaplain, you ended up in Antarctica somehow, like in the South Pole. How did that happen? How did you end up in such a place?
Yeah, I think that as with most things, I was chasing a girl, and that got me to Antarctica. In this case, it was my wife, so that's good. She had heard about Antarctica, I think, years before through a fireman who had wanted to go or had been there, and it just created that seed and the dream for her. And of course, we had talked about it, and I thought, well, that'll never happen. But she's the kind of person who actually pursues those odd dreams, and so she took a position there and found a position she thought I could get. But my resume was maybe a little lackluster for even the lowest jobs in Antarctica I couldn't get. And so she went without me and then went again. And so I was beginning to not like Antarctica because I couldn't get down there. But the second time she went, she made a contact and was able to at least get my foot in the door and get me a phone call. And that helped us to both get down there. But yeah, it was an interesting journey for sure, just even learning about Antarctica and the programs they have there and wanting to go.
Amazing. Go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say, so I would love to hear, when you were talking about getting down there and using the means that you could so you could get a position down there. What What did you do? And what was it like when you went down there? What was life like?
Yeah, it's so I was in a logistics job, which meant mostly I was doing inventory and moving things. If someone needed something, I would go and find it, which ended up being way more interesting than it sounds, especially the going and finding stuff. Some of the storage all year round is out on what's called ice berms. So just these piles of ice that they've lifted up so that the snow won't just blow it over. And you go looking for things. So it's kind of like a little treasure hunt. In some cases they're there, and in some cases they're not. But life is very interesting. The first piece of it is you get there and you find out you can't leave. When the last planes go and the doors shut, it's either a good feeling or a bad feeling. And people find out they either made the best decision of their life or the worst decision of their life. So you're stuck there, and who you're stuck with kind of makes a big part of it. But the advantage is you don't have to cook any of your own food. You don't have to go to the grocery store to buy your own food. You don't have to fill up your gas. You're just in this building. And so a lot of the mundane things from life fade away. But having said that, you work 6 days a week because you're there to work. So that was a little bit of adjustment, not having that 2-day weekend. Then you're in the most fascinating place on earth, where you're on 2 miles of ice, on glacial ice that's, incrementally moving just a little bit at a time. You can't tell, obviously. One day it'll all fall into the ocean. Just even thinking things like that is so crazy. But there are ice tunnels beneath you that you can go and walk through, of course, usually with somebody. They don't like you going by yourself. And then the average temperature outside during the winter was negative 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So you're just in this very amazing, wonderful, different place. And to mention some of the research real quickly, because that's what you're there for, is to support the research that's going on. People are researching clean air, weather, seismic activity. There's telescopes peering in space, of course, because it's a really great spot for that. Neutrinos, which I know very little about, but they're very fascinating. I mean, everything down to glaciology and doing ice cores. It's just, you learn about all this science and then learn, like, you're doing this really small part of what it all takes. And it's fascinating.
Wow. Just to be part of something that's so different and bigger than yourself, I think would be really fascinating. So your official job was logistics, but you often talk about that time in your life as being the unofficial chaplain to that research team. So I'm wondering how that came about. Did you come up with that yourself? How did you define, or how did you express your pastoral identity while you were there?
Yeah, it was definitely defined by myself. They don't have an official chaplain at the South Pole. They do have some at the one other station for a short amount of time throughout the year, and that comes through the Air National Guard, I think. But so when I told people who I was, the first reaction is a little bit of shock. I said, I'm a Baptist minister, and there's this kind of, what are we going to do with this guy for 6 months, or whatever, however long we're together. And of course, I try to get to know them as fast as possible, but really it was more of an offering to say, I know this may not be what you want, but I'll be here with you, and I'll try really hard never to violate any kind of boundary between us. If I'm talking to you about something that you don't like, just say, that's okay. Chaplain or whatever, just give me I don't want to talk about that. But mostly I just try to make myself available for them. The way I express that best is we had a church service once a week. So we had about 4 to 5 people. I think one time we had 6. So that was very exciting.
Nice.
And just a very basic, we would go over some passages together. Usually listen to music, because we're not going to sing with only 4 people. And but it was a lot of fun. And I think for the people that came, it was a nice way to feel like they were still connected to their own faith while they were there. And you'll laugh about this, Alisi. The way I connected most to the group through my pastoral identity was another logistics guy, and I started a group called Thinking and Drinking. And every Thursday evening, we would get off work, and they would have a topic that was proposed by my friend, and it was usually something philosophical. And they would just go on and on, sometimes while drinking, sometimes not, and sometimes more drinking than thinking. And I would do my best to offer, pastoral insight where it was available, or even just a Christian insight in moments like that. Very smart people, sometimes difficult to do, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, I think there's a lot of historical accounts for that, or parallels with that. I think Martin Luther had a group like that too. Yeah. So how is that? Is that similar or different from the role of chaplain when you started CPE training and you thought about, reflected on your role as an unofficial chaplain? Did you find any correlations or similarities, or did that inform your CPE training in some way?
Yeah, I think it just makes those boundaries of discussion so much broader and really honoring where people are at, because a lot of the, these scientists were sometimes not really aggressive, but once I got to know them, they would question me quite directly about my own beliefs and say, why are you so crazy or whatever. And it was learning to just be with them where they were. And I think that's what I think chaplaincy then encouraged even more so is, as just coming in, you never know what you're walking into when you go to any given patient's room. And then, of course, realizing what we bring with us and being ready to let go of a lot of that. I think that prepared me for chaplaincy in that way. Yeah.
I'd love to hear more, like, of course, not divulging any confidentiality, but like what were some of the different kinds of people who were there? Were you kind of the anomaly because you have a lot of scientists there, or is it more of a very interdisciplinary location?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, certainly the anomaly from being a person that I think that's a full-time ministry kind of person going down. But Antarctica is so fascinating because when people want to go, they will give up really nice jobs to get there because they want to be in the research or they just want to be a part of it. And so you have these people that are really renowned professors or astrophysicists that might be janitors because that's the job they can get. And so that part of the community is really interesting to see. You do have people from all walks of life. Some people are just trying to save money and they drive heavy equipment, and that's a place they can do it and spend almost no money and get paid a decent amount while they're there. And so you do have people from all kinds of walks of life. It's really interesting and fascinating from that standpoint for sure.
And your wife was there as a researcher. What was her job?
She was the station physician. We always joked that you wanted her and the guy that ran the power plant doing absolutely nothing. He let them if something was wrong. Either one of them was doing anything. So they would, a lot of times, like she would just find projects that other people were working on. I mean, she even worked on projects with the plumbers to find things to do and ways to connect to the community while she was there and help out.
So you formed a community that was really diverse in a lot of ways and from different places and different reasons to being there. What did that period of time teach you about community?
I think having grown up and lived in the United States and at least my understanding of community has always been so individual and, individual families and you do have bits of community, but being at the South Pole, we had 42 people my year, and that will vary year by year a little bit. And, but you find out that community is absolutely essential. Your job and everyone else's job is dependent for the community survival. And, it's just part of life there. And you can get away from people a little bit, but I found that if you got away from people, it was to your own detriment. And, there were so many creative ways to stay connected to the community. And this is what my wife was really good at. I would be tired from my job and sometimes feel like I would just want to go to sleep or, watch a movie in the room or something. And she would say, yeah, but there's an astronomy class down the hall and so we learned to unicycle. We learned how to weld. We became certified on the ham radio. We took a level 1 semi-yike class, which didn't count for anything because it was really just a guy who had taken the class and then said, does anyone want to learn this? It's just amazing that the people, especially who had been there before, came to the community and said, here's what I know how to do, and I would like to teach you. And in their extra time would just give a class. And so you could just go and attend those things. It was amazing. So to me, the big takeaway was just that community is essential, but it's also voluntarily something you connect to in a way that then ends up giving life to you and those around you. So how do you take part in that?
When we had the quarantines and the social isolation during COVID, did that bring back any memories for you, or did you feel like you had some resources because of your time in Antarctica, or how did you relate to that?
Yeah, it did. And it's funny because the group of chaplains I was working with at the VA, they were similar. The approach at the South Pole is you lean into anything that might be bothering you, right? So in that isolation, the community jokes a lot about, oh, so-and-so's starting to get a little toasty, or you just speak it into existence. You don't let it be nothing. And so two big examples are when the station closes and the planes leave and they close the doors and you know you can't leave. That night, they do a showing of John Carpenter's The Thing, a movie about an alien that's discovered in the ice at an Antarctic research station, and it starts killing everybody. And so you're like, oh, I'm stuck here and I can't leave, and we're going to watch this movie that, brings that out. And then in the middle of the winter, when everyone's really feeling kind of down, they show The Shining. And so Jack Nicholson is stuck at a hotel in the middle of nowhere and can't leave and starts killing people. And so it brings to the surface all these feelings that you're having and doesn't allow you to just sort of wrestle with them on your own. And that kind of, when I saw that then with the chaplains I was working with COVID, it was really refreshing to say, okay, we're not, we're going to joke about things that are serious. We're going to talk about these things in a way that's meaningful and not just let it sort of fester away underneath us. That was a nice connection that I made during that time. And I think it was useful to have that sort of that nodding smile underneath, as you talk about really serious things.
I mean, that sounds fascinating. Especially what I love is embracing the dark humor of the horror movies where you could see those parallels, and also the community of that everybody's in the same boat. If anything, I love seeing that there's that piece of everybody has that opportunity to share with one another, to have that communal opportunity. What do you think? Going with that, how have you applied that to being a chaplain where you have, where you're currently serving? What are some of the ways that you've integrated making the most of creating that rapport with the interdisciplinary team, sharing together those rich moments?
Yeah, I think the biggest part, especially kind of sticking to that community theme and trying to figure out, how that affects people is, when you, in my experience working in the hospital at the VA, you have all these people that have a shared experience of being veterans, and then they're in the hospital for whatever reason they're in there for different lengths of time. And the one thing I got over and over again was this sense of loneliness and being disconnected from their family or their faith community. And when you come in as a chaplain, they're glad to see you, but you're not their pastor. And trying to creatively find a way where you can still then help them understand they're not there by themselves. I mean, they're there 24/7 with medical staff that care about them, with chaplains, with, the entire interdisciplinary team, all trying to find ways to make their stay better and healthier for them. And so how do you disconnect them from that negative thought process of, well, I'm here by myself? Well, you're not here you're here with people very much like you, and you might not be able to go out of your room and talk to them, but maybe you can. I mean, I don't know. It depends quite on the person. And so I think, that was a big deal, was trying to find that energy and that mercy and creative energy within the interdisciplinary team. And I really learned from the palliative care team a lot on that. They were so good at coming in ways, and oftentimes I felt unneeded as a chaplain when the palliative care team was there, because they were so good at asking all these questions and connecting the patients in ways to their own strengths that I thought, well, do you have anything to add? And, I'll come back later and do my own visit, because you're just so good at this. But John, I don't know if that answers your question entirely, but that's sort of where I was, moving there.
Well, you mentioned the palliative care team, and there is a lot of opportunity in healthcare and other chaplaincy contexts to work with other disciplines and an interdisciplinary team. And I'm wondering how that experience with ministering to a scientific community, I wonder if you learn some ways to relate to people of other disciplines, and especially in healthcare where there is much of an emphasis on, obviously, on science. And we like that we like that we are science-based. But sometimes it's hard to make room for the spiritual, the mysterious, the uncertain, the awe. But you were in a place where you had very much of an emphasis on science and research. And at the same time, you're experiencing probably awe in a way that we normally don't on a daily basis, where you're in a place where you can really look up and see the stars in a completely different way, or experience just the magnitude of the universe. I don't know if I asked that in a really good way, but just wondering how you were able to integrate all of that in coming back and into your clinical work.
Yeah, no, one of the guys that I connected with really well down there, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, about 3 times during my time there, he stopped me and he said something along the lines of, I love you, I just don't understand why you're so delusional. And this was in respect to my faith kind of stance. And we're still friends today. I mean, we'll talk now, and we've been to weddings together and things like that. Like, this community is still together. And so when I was struggling at times, especially as a student in CPE, trying to find my own role in interdisciplinary teams and prove my worth or say, here, I have something to offer too. The thought that kept surfacing to my mind was, I just need to remain here, be present, and continue to offer these patients my care to the best of my ability. And then through being consistent like that, I think people began to see not only does the person care, but they do have something to offer. And the one experience that really comes to mind is a patient that was on hospice, and me and another person that was on the team became actually pretty close, because when that person died, we both recognized the care that the other person was giving, and then found a way to actually grow closer to each other because of the loss that we experienced, and knowing that it wasn't just another patient. And they were and I think that, she was able to see chaplains in, maybe a different light because of that experience as well. So I guess the South will help me in some ways with that.
Yeah.
And another experience that we had that may or may not make sense is during COVID, we were trying really hard to find ways to minister to the staff who was having such a hard time. As you know, they were just exhausted. And our chaplain team took a room next to the MICU and put some rocks on the table. All the rocks had different words on them, like hope or joy or love or strength. And they were encouraged to come in, take a little break, and just find a rock that meant something to them. And that was pretty much the extent of the spiritual aspect of it, right? Like, they were free to be completely non-faith oriented. And then after they picked up the rock, the part that I loved is that we asked them, now, what does that word mean to you? Why did you pick that rock? And we heard stories connected to family, connected to patients, connected to their own feelings, maybe lack of a source of strength. So they picked up the rock that said strength because that's what they needed. And it was just awesome to have that moment of saying, here, just think about this. And I really enjoyed it, because some of the staff that I knew were not faith oriented, and maybe not against faith, but certainly didn't find it useful. That experience was good for them in some way, and connected them to their own sources of strength and goodness in some way that I think was cool.
I love that. Are you able to find an experience of all? I'm just wondering if you had some kind of culture shock coming back to daily life, almost like when people are deployed through the military and they come back to civilian life, and it's so different. Like, the priorities are different, perspective is so different. I wonder if you had some of that experience, and if you feel like it's changed your view of certain things.
Yeah, I think the biggest shock coming back was just the lack of understanding for why we even went in the first place. There's just that, even my parents, there's so much to go there. If when you get down there, let's say someone dies, one of your family members gets sick and dies, you can't leave and come back. And so there's this big commitment to going down there. And of course, you are leaving everyone behind, but it's also cold. And why would you want to go there? And so then you come back. In some ways, it's like coming back from a mission trip where you have all these emotions and you try to tell people about it, and just you get blank stares, or maybe you get nods. But in this case, they're even more aggressive to say, yeah, but why'd you go in the first place? And which is interesting, because people have places and things that they want to do in life. And oftentimes they'll say, but I can't do it because of A, B, C, or D. And when we went to Antarctica, there were a lot of sacrifices that we made, or we quit jobs that we loved, or, things like that. And that's, I think, the lesson I learned coming back. And looking forward, when I do come to something that I think, well, and now that we have kids, it's harder, every commitment that you make makes it harder to move away. And the kids do make it impossible to go to Antarctica now until they're at least 18. But it's that same mindset of, what am I willing to set aside if this really matters? And I think that distinction of, does this really matter to me? And not just saying that it matters so that people can identify with my suffering. Oh, I can't do this because I really want to, but I can't, well, it gives you a language to say, well, you can do that if you want to, in most cases, and helping find a way sometimes.
No, that's really helpful to hear, especially in terms of counting the cost for what people can do in the future. I talk with a lot of people about, sacrificing for future education, for future positions. Definitely a lot of those areas, and also roles, taking certain roles that might not be a step up, but it certainly is a step of broadening, where it enables that person to have a deeper and richer ability to minister or to serve in new and exciting ways. I think that's a fascinating approach, fascinating perspective to look at. On a fun note, did you run a marathon while you were there? And also, I'm just curious, how did your body take all of that? Was there a toll on your body? And also, was there a toll, or not necessarily a toll, but how did your spiritual life develop or transform? Three big questions: marathon, body, and spirit.
We'll start with the marathon first because it was terrible. But during the summer months, you're able to run a marathon outside. I think almost every station hosts one, or at least two of them do. And so being a runner, it was when I learned of that was a big goal. I was like, well, I'm in Antarctica. I can check this continent off my list of, do a marathon on each continent. That became, cool. While I was there, that became a goal of life, which didn't exist beforehand because that would have been crazy, right? But so I had to do mine on the treadmill because after I didn't get there until it was already cold enough. I did one run outside and it was great until I turned around. The wind made it so cold. I just didn't have the right clothing on. And I realized, and it was only maybe 3 miles. It was the worst run of my life. But so I had to learn to like the treadmill, and it did take a lot of time because being on that, ice, you're up almost 2 miles. And then there's also some kind of, again, not a scientist, but the barometric pressure changes. And so some days it feels like 12,000 feet and some days it feels like 10,000, but it does wreak havoc on your body. And so getting used to the physical labor takes a while. But if you're persistent and do a little bit at a time, you can eventually get there. So I did a marathon on the treadmill. It was not a good experience. Just that particular day was not good, but I did complete it. So I've checked it off with an asterisk because it was on a treadmill, not on terra firma. But
still valid, I think.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I'll count it.
I'd give that to you more than a Barry Bonds home run. So you're good. No performance enhancing drugs were used in this one. Sorry, I don't want to. We might get some letters on that statement.
That's right. Yeah, that you're aware of, John. Yeah. So something interesting that happens to your body while you're there, you have a lack of sunlight for a lot of the time during the winter, and you also, being cold often enough, I guess your body exerts a lot of effort, and so you get this thing called the T3 syndrome. And basically, from my understanding of it and my experience of it, is that after a while, your brain doesn't quite work as well. You get a little foggy. You may have some mood swings, things like that. And I think that staying active is encouraged while you're there. And I think that for me, that helped a lot to some sort of combating against a lot of that and staying engaged in all those community events. But so there was a lot of exercise by a lot of people. And I think that really helps your body sort of fight that off. The unfortunate experience I had with the T3 syndrome is there was a group called Data Over Lore. And it started at a similar time. We started doing our church service and putting flyers up. And then soon enough, there were flyers right next to it called Data Over Lore. And the whole point of the group was to create conversation about how faith groups have actually created more harm on our planet than good. And I went every week because I thought it was I learned a lot. I learned a lot about Mother Teresa from other sources that maybe were a little more critical, But near the end of the year, they said, hey, we'd love for you to come and share about why you believe what you do. And of course, you're like the most excited person. I get to just tell you why I believe what I do. This is amazing. But my brain was a bit fuzzy. And so as I would try to answer questions, especially on the fly, one of the guys said that his wife is very Catholic, and he was just rejecting some of her, what he called like staunch views of why Christ came and what he would have to do and personally believe. And so I was trying desperately to give him other atonement theories. There's so many ways we can look at this one event, and you don't even need atonement theories according to some people. But I just couldn't quite grasp the words, like they were just floating away from me. And afterwards I thought, oh, what a failure, but I think it was this T3 syndrome hard at work. And not to miss the last part of the question, because it's really fun just spiritually. What I think the best part for me was going out in the darkness. Every day I would walk to work, and so I would leave the building and go down and around just so that I could make sure I got outside every day. There's no animals, so there's no, you're at the South Pole, 800 miles from the coast. You don't have to worry about any animals attacking you. So you walk out, stillness, quiet, and just this absolute, I don't know, like at least you said, the stars are different. The sky is amazing. And you can stand there even for 30 seconds and have this connection that felt unlikely for what I expected to experience in the dark, where usually you have some kind of fear or wonder what's going on. And here you are experiencing God in this very safe and wondrous way. It was, I think, the biggest part of my spiritual life. There was just that daily walk to work was amazing.
That's amazing to think about. So no penguins either? Didn't see it.
No, not the South Pole, no penguins. I did a talk one time for some kids at a school, just, I don't know, fourth graders, and they get, so how many seals were at the South Pole? No, there's no seals because they're all at the coast, or, how many penguins? And so they kept going through all the way to birds. There's not even any birds. And then one of them just said, well, why did you go there? So yeah, the wonderful life is all down on the coast at the other two stations that the U.S. ones and the other ones other countries have too. But
I can imagine there would have been some maybe trepidation on your part, just thinking about how it would affect you mentally and spiritually and physically for that amount of time. So who gave you support? And I mean, I understand you talking about how your spirituality was a source of strength and support for you. What else did you find helped you with that mental wellness and just overall well-being while you were there?
yeah, it's a good question because you don't know going in what your experience is gonna be, right? And I think even talking to people that have had very, very vastly different experiences from one winter to another winter, because some people go back over and over, and one might be really bad and they don't know why. And so I think for me, that exercise was really helpful, being connected and doing things with the community all the time. I had my wife there, which was, I mean, nobody else. One other person had a girlfriend there who then eventually became their wife. So that it's hard to underestimate or overestimate how wonderful that was to have her there, because that's a huge support network, right? And
Yeah.
it's hard for you to get as lonely when you have that person there with you. But I think beyond that, there was, just getting to know people and finding out where they were on a regular basis and hearing how they were dealing with things. And I think that was really helpful for me, just to constantly be, wondering, well, how are you doing? And how, and some people didn't like that question, it's like, don't ask, okay, everyone learns, don't ask these three people that question ever, because they weren't having a great time. But I think for me, that engagement in communal discussion and and that's where that thinking and drinking group really came in helpful for me too, because we would talk about everything and people would dream about crazy stuff. They would bring up topics that were crazy and wild, and we would just talk about it. And that led to talking about emotions and how people were feeling. And then you do your own personal check and think, how am I doing? And so then when I would go out on those walks in the mornings, I was able to remember how I felt the day before, and then pray about it and think about it in ways that were helpful for me to sort of release into the aurora above us,
Yeah.
all these mystical things that were happening. So yeah, it was definitely strange though. And one of the things I worried about most, at least, it was actually, can my wife and I survive being this close together for so long? I mean, you don't know until you do. And so it's
A good point.
a strange fear going in.
Mhm. And I heard you say you can't go back until the kids are at least 18, but do you have in your mind a thought that you might go back someday?
I hope so. I mean, we'll be pretty old. But the program changed a lot with how they allow people per age to go. But when we were there were definitely people in their 60s working there. But yeah, we joke with that. We have two friends that we met. They met while they were there, and now they're married, and so we're good friends with them and talk to them a lot. And they have a child who is the same age as our son. And so the joke is that when they're both in college, that we'll go again and we talk about which jobs each person will try and get while we're there and stuff. But it's a ways off. Yeah, it's like 2046, I think, was the earliest we could go back.
Okay.
Maybe they'll change the program and they'll let us take kids down. That would be great.
Maybe. Yeah.
2046. Wow.
It's the only thing I've planned in my life that far out.
I appreciate you taking the time and to explain where you've gone and where you're going. Yeah, is there anything else that you'd like to explore?
Well, it's funny. One of the things that we recently started doing through these friends that we met down there is there's a book that a man put out, John Collins Black, and he hid 5 treasures throughout the United States and then wrote this book about it with hints. And so, I still don't have a full-time job, but I'm we're looking at that and analyzing that. But here's this book, and what do we think about it? And so, funny enough, just the wording of your question, like, is there anything else you'd like to explore? Right now, I'm exploring parks while looking for hidden treasure,
I like that.
which is not something I ever thought I'd be doing.
I think that's a good imagery, though, for everyday things, or even like for a role of the chaplain. I remember when I was going through CPE for the first time and trying to come up with a way to envision my role and just my pastoral identity. And one of the things that came up to me at the time was being a spiritual detective, just trying to see where people's resources were, where they saw God at work, and being a witness to suffering in different ways. So that's kind of searching for treasure, I think, goes along with that too.
Alicia, I had a man tell me once, I was in his room and I was asking him these types of curious questions, and he finally stopped me and said, "Chaplain, it seems like you're fishing for something." And I just put my hands up and I said, I don't want to, I'm not trying to take you anywhere you're not comfortable with. I was just trying to get to know you so I can be a better chaplain. But he was not happy with my questions.
That's funny.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, we always like to end with this question, and partially because we always like to figure out where are you at, and just essentially like to always end on a note of life. So what is giving you life these days?
Well, and I love that you all asked that question. I've enjoyed hearing the responses of others, and it helps you wonder about what might give you life. So I really enjoy that question. For me, we have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and having been able to, with COVID, stay at home a little bit, because as a student, we weren't allowed to go in to the VA. So I had a lot of time at home with my son, and then a lot of time with my daughter, purposely. I'm not working here. But they give us so much life, and they just redefine life in different ways. The comment that my son said the other day, my wife was ironing something, and he said, "Where did the wrinkles go? Do they go into the iron?" Just trying to understand life and watching them do that. And the aspect of it that I'm loving right now is our local church has been given a Lilly grant to help families adjust to teaching faith to their children. And it's this really fascinating proposal, and they're not quite done with it, but a lot of those questions of, like, how as a parent do you teach kids about your own faith in a healthy way, in a way that's beneficial, in a way they can understand, all these things that are wonderful. And I grew up outside of the church, really. And so it's helpful to me, but it gives me a lot of life to ask those questions to our own kids and to watch how they respond to when we do our Bible reading at night and the questions that come from it, and also trying to figure out what I don't want to tell them, and the language I want to use. And it's just so fascinating. So that's all bringing me a lot of life right now. I've been trying to do a little devotional writing as well, and that's always fun. It's like when you write a sermon, you get more out of it than anyone else. So it's time well spent. Yeah, our kids are just are wonderful. And we started late, and we're enjoying now what all of our friends had told us we needed to enjoy. So, yeah, that's where most of our life is coming from these days, I think.
That's wonderful. And, Brett, I think you're such a life-giving person. You have always been somebody who really enjoys life. And I've enjoyed seeing what you and Sarah and the kids have gotten into, and all your adventures. So I'm so glad you have found chaplaincy. I think it's such a wonderful vocation and such a good fit for you. So thanks for spending time with us and telling us about your very unique experiences and how that might relate to some of the work that we do.
I'm so glad to spend this time with you. And it's funny, I'm doing my first panel for possible candidates for chaplaincy this year. And so just later today, I sit in the meeting to learn how to do it. So it'll be a lot of fun learning that process too. So, yeah, I'm so glad to be in the chaplain world.
Awesome. And we are too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brett.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Now it's time for the non-anxious presence with Elise Tremaine.
And John Betz.
John, I love that conversation because how often do you get to meet anybody who's been to the South Pole, but also who had a chaplaincy type ministry? I know it wasn't official, but what I loved about it is that Brett said, well, here's what I know. Here's what I can bring. Here are my gifts. And this is how I can contribute. And which is very similar to how he described other people were doing that in the community, providing astronomy classes or different things, that he was able to say, these are my gifts, and just make it available to the folks there. It's inspiring, I think, for us to feel like, we do have gifts. We can contribute, not just to the people we serve, but also the team that we're serving with.
You're right. It appeared like in such a place where resources can get very sparse, including emotional resources. It seems like everybody pulls together their giftings, the ways that the rich tapestry of their personalities, their wisdom, their knowledge, their interests, so that I imagine part of it is a survival aspect so that they don't get bored, they don't get cabin fever. But also I think there's that need for connection that everybody feels. And I think Brett did a great job of discussing how people wanted that connection, whether that was through the chaplaincy ministry that he was providing, and also a lot of the other aspects. Like, I want to go down there and run a marathon now.
And on the treadmill, not I, but
I don't know, circle.
Yeah, but I mean, to say that you did that in the South Pole, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty wizard. I love that. Well, and when he was talking, there's a great quote that I came across. It's by Gabrielle Walker, Antarctica, Intimate Portrait of the World's Most Mysterious Continent. And Gabrielle writes, the most experienced Antarcticans talk not about conquering the continent, but about surrendering to it. No matter how powerful you believe yourself to be, no matter how good your technology, how rich your invention, Antarctica is always bigger. And if we humans look honestly into this ice mirror and see how small we are, we may learn a humility that is the first step towards wisdom. And I think Brett did a great job of communicating that, especially when he discussed how he was able to take his experiences there and apply it to his chaplaincy, his healthcare chaplaincy ministry and CPE, and being able to figure out how to customize and contour plans of care for others, and seeing, hey, what is it that you need, instead of, here, I'm bringing this split bag of tricks.
Right.
It's, hey, I'm here. I'm present. What is it that I can bring that'll help you?
Also, I felt a sense of awe just hearing him talk about it, and just like this, listening to this quote that you just shared. I feel a sense of awe just thinking about it, what it would be like to be there. So I can't imagine actually being there and having had that experience, So I wonder, because in the day-to-day or day-to-day lives, I think it's so easy to forget about the beauty and the mystery that we have around us. So I love that he said what he said about searching for treasure, because so much of what I think chaplains can bring to the people we serve and to our teams is that reminder of mystery and awe, and how much bigger the universe and God, or however you define God, how much bigger that is than us. And to help them make that connection, because you can't quantify that, you can't measure that. It's not profit making, but it is so much about what gives us purpose and meaning and makes us human at the same time. That's so important. And we forget that we have the gifts to bring that to the surface.
Yeah, the awe, the humility, the image that I still think of is the stilts, and eventually the place where they are might fall into the ocean. And so the very temporary nature to the human presence there, and how important it is that we are good stewards of our world. It just showed me. I was just listening. I just wanted to. I wanted to hear Brett discuss this while I was watching it on the screen.
Right. Yes, I agree. I was thinking if we had this on video for folks, which hopefully someday we can also show videos of our interviews. It would be great to show pictures of that. So maybe there's a way that we can share that on Instagram or some other places. But another takeaway for me, you were mentioning the marathon earlier, was just the importance of moving your body and physical exercise and self-care, and how that does impact not only our mental well-being, but I think spiritual health as well. And that's a piece that sometimes we can neglect. I know that, fun fact, the very first 5K that I ever ran was one that Brett organized on campus at McAfee School of Theology. We had a dear professor, Dr. John Claypool. Some people may be familiar with his writings, and we were very, very fortunate to have him for a couple of classes. And he died while he was teaching at McAfee, and I was actually enrolled in a class that he was teaching at the time, and Brett organized this 5K in memory of him. And that was my first taste of running. I had never ran 3 miles in my whole life, so obviously I walked for a lot of that 5K. But that was the first time that I got kind of the bug for running, and now it's really a form of self-care for me and exercise, and I think that really does help integrate all the spiritual and the mental well-being as well. Do you have a practice of, I know you run too, John.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that helpful, and do you have other forms of physical exercise or movement?
It's absolutely essential. I find that it is part of my coping, my mental health coping. We just purchased a bicycle that my son and I are able to ride on. And so I love it. It's one of those power bikes. And so I love being able to ride with him on the back without the power and struggling. So when Brett was talking about going and running for that 3 miles and just being winded, I could join that subgroup when I first tried to ride without any power. And I was just going, oh my gosh, because this bike is like chromoly, it's steel. It's not like I was used to these road bikes. So, and you're absolutely right. For me, it's a way to center myself. It's a way for me to also clear my mind, to plug into God. Or even, I hate treadmills, but I've started to get into that, where there are a lot of treadmills where you can plug in, and I load up my Kindle. And so I'm reading different kinds of books on my Kindle. So I feel like I'm able to clear my mind and have that ability to center myself.
I do that with audiobooks sometimes. I've had to use a treadmill too for the winter months that we've had. So I want to finish with a quote, or a blessing rather, actually from Dr. Claypool, since we mentioned him. But first, I want to remind our listeners and to thank you again for reviews and for subscribing to the podcast and listening, but also to ask you to continue to share the podcast, the episodes with other folks. That really helps us to continue to create content like this and to interview other folks and to continue to send us ideas, because we love your ideas for future episodes. But now listen to this blessing by Dr. Claypool. Depart now in the fellowship of God the Father, and as you go, remember, in the goodness of God you were born into this world. By the grace of God you have been kept all the day long, even until this hour. By the love of God, fully revealed in the face of Jesus, you are being redeemed. Obviously, that's a Christian blessing, but I hope whoever you are, that you're able to sense awe, to have in the goodness of God and the universe and the mystery of life all around you. Blessings.
I just want to remind everybody, yes, please like, subscribe, go on to Instagram, go on to podcasts. Also give us a call at 502-536-7508. That's 502-536-7508. Please leave a voicemail, and we would love to hear your feedback and also hear any encouragement if you'd like. So thank you so much. Go in peace.